Ladies and gentlemen, it does seem like we are inching closer to a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine, although it looks like Zelensky wants some security guarantees, especially since they're going forward with this mineral deal. The guarantees between the United States and Ukraine might just be a moot point, considering the fact that Trump wants to have a good relationship with Russia, which would create a situation that would really not allow Russia to reinvade Ukraine if the United States had some type of economic relationship with Russia. Now that we have open dialogue with Russia, there's no real reason, especially if Russia gets some territory in eastern Ukraine, there would be no real reason if the US and Russia has a diplomatic relationship for Russia to go on the offense against Ukraine. But it seems like the minerals deal has been agreed to, but Zelensky wants more guarantees, and this is really part of the peace negotiation. Ukraine is going to say, all right, we'll do this. It's a little bit deeper than even just agreeing for the United States to extract the minerals, because there are a lot of untapped minerals within Ukraine. And this is more of a US Ukraine combined effort to where they've got the minerals, they're all untapped. They don't have the investment to be able to extract them. The United States could give them that. So it's kind of a bigger deal where the United States makes an investment into Ukraine and is able to get the minerals. Now, on top of all of this is more so repaying what the United States has paid for this war when it comes to Ukraine. And the reason Ukraine would give up these minerals is because it's very important they still have a good relationship with the United States and, by extension, NATO. They certainly would want to join NATO, although it's not going to happen. There have been some rumors on what the peace deal will be, but it is all speculation. It really is crazy on X. You'll see people just blurt out, these people like 200, 300K followers, peace deal has been reached, it's a ceasefire, and then they'll list like bullet points. But the point of it is, it does seem like this peace deal is going to involve Russia, and you know what, I want to go to this map right here, Russia potentially getting the regions that they control. I'm not sure if when this map was done exactly. This was 4 hours ago. I thought they had a little bit more land than this on the eastern side of Ukraine, but they would be getting at least some of this land that they currently have. They'd be officially annexing it. Crimea would be, it's already been annexed, but it'd be recognized as a part of Russia. In exchange, Ukraine would get security assurances from the United States. What those would be, we'll have to see it, in terms of the verbiage. It would also be more so a Western agreement with Ukraine. Again, that's kind of irrelevant because the idea is the United States has their own economic relationship with Russia, possibly involving extracting minerals from those areas. The reason Russia would agree to this would be because the United States controls NATO. Russia understands if the United States plays hardball. This is what liberals wanted to do. The idea would be to say, no, we're not doing this. We're not giving you an inch. We're not allowing you to take any land in Ukraine. We're going to continue to fund Ukraine, which honestly doesn't make a lot of sense because at some point Ukraine is literally going to run out of men. And Russia knew that. That's why they were waiting them out. The front line was barely moving for about a year and a half. But that's what liberals wanted to do. They said, no, it's unacceptable they get any land. Well, Trump has a different approach considering just the dynamics of this war and the military strength of both Russia and Ukraine. There's only so much you could hold up for Ukraine until the dam breaks, and you either have to give up even more land and cede that land to Russia because Ukraine's military would be so strained. And that would also include a money drain from the United States continuing to fund Ukraine for multiple more years. And then if they lose all their troops, then you have to send in NATO troops. And that makes the war even bigger. So the idea is you end it right now. Russia would say they could potentially agree to give up some minerals to the United States in the land that they just took over, because they know that if the United States wants to play hardball, they would be fighting for a longer period of time. They would be losing troops. They would be wasting money on a war to where the front line is barely moving. So for them, they want this to be over as quick as possible. I think at this point, Russia, that is, and they want to leave with land. And they know the United States is the big player in NATO and they're the negotiating force. And Donald Trump is the big dog when it comes to this entire thing. So when you're talking about a win for Russia, a win for Ukraine, a win for the United States, there's going to be people that view this, certainly if Russia gets land, as a clear loss for Ukraine. Although this is comparable when you've got a bigger country invading a smaller country. like the Soviet Union did with Finland, and people were talking about that back in World War II, to where the Soviet Union got some land, but it was viewed as a victory for Finland. This would be a situation to where Russia gets land, Ukraine gets assurances, but it would be more so the United States has a relationship now with Russia that would really make it to where it's not necessarily realistic, or it doesn't make much sense for a Russian reinvasion of Ukraine. I think that's the overall point you want here. So it is understandable that Ukraine would want the security assurances. There's going to have to be give and take with all of these countries. And I think if I was Trump, it would be more so of a European thing. The idea is, obviously it does get a little bit complicated if the United States has access to 50% of their minerals, which is what I think the deal was. Well, then you would have to somehow secure Ukraine. Although at that point, if you're already in bed with Russia, does it really matter? So I think the Ukraine needs to be, if Europe wants to secure Ukraine, that's their own doing. If I was Trump, I really wouldn't make a big deal with Ukraine when it comes to security, mainly because we don't want to be in the same situation we were 2-3 years ago, where we're the leader of NATO and we're forced to do this. And really all of the arguments with Europeans never made any sense, because the United States views Russia as a different threat rather than many of these European countries. So I wonder if Trump decides to play hardball when it comes to Zelensky demanding security. It'll be interesting, because, this is not something that Trump wants, to be completely honest. You really don't want to guarantee Ukraine much of any security. I mean, maybe the European countries would, but the idea for Ukraine would be if the U.S. and Russia have a decent relationship, it eliminates the alienization the West has with the East, which is something that was really revving up during the Biden administration, to where they made Russia the enemy, and then Russia started to get closer with China just as a byproduct of Russia being alienated from the entirety of all of the mainstream Western countries. And so you're talking about, well, what is everyone going to get for this? The United States, when you look at it from our perspective, I think it's a win-win. I mean, obviously, you've got Russia taking some land. That's an adversary gaining land. It's not the most ideal situation, but based on what they lost for the land that they got, I think it's pretty good. Because they lost a lot, and they wanted to really take over a lot of Ukraine. They weren't able to do it. The Ukrainians did deter them with the help of NATO, the funding of NATO, but they were able to do that. And now it looks like this is trying to be a thing to where it's like a facilitated 3 different countries all come out kind of on top. Although certainly I think Ukraine is going to be pretty pissed off at whatever deal comes of this. They're going to want some type of security assurance, but I'm sure they didn't want to lose any land, but that's just how it is. I had been saying people for months, they're going to lose land. There's no way to get that land back unless there's some type of crazy leverage maneuver that's done that forces Russia to head back east and back over the original Russian border, like back in 2022. But it's just not going to happen. It's not possible right now. It's not feasible unless you decide to escalate the war with NATO troops or with more sophisticated NATO military weapons, which again is something that Trump, he came in and said he was going to do the opposite. He said he was going to end the war. And so ending the war does involve a deal that would likely, the thought was the regions would either become independent and they would have a referendum, or they would just be Russian. I think they're probably going to be Russian, especially with this economic relationship and all of the rare earths and the minerals located in the area right now that's occupied by Russia. There's been talks and there's been rumors of the United States possibly getting some of those minerals extracted in exchange for the U.S. saying, we're going to help facilitate the end of this war, and we're going to give you more land. And so it makes total sense to end it off right now. And so Russia would want to do it because they wouldn't want to lose any more men. They'd only have to give up some minerals in an area they just acquired. And they would also have a decent relationship with the United States now, to where they don't feel like there's this crazy NATO encroachment onto their land, and you possibly also have a buffer zone. I mean, Ukraine was the buffer state, the buffer country, and look, we'll see what happens, but I do think this is a thing that where Ukraine is going to want military protection in some form, possibly from the European countries. Again, at this point, I mean, it's different because it's like if we have our own separate economic relationship now, especially with Trump and Putin, I feel a little bit more confident that Putin isn't going to do anything, mainly because, well, if you look at what Trump did from 2017 to 2021, compared to what Putin did 2014 under a Democrat, the annexation of Crimea, 2022 under a Democrat, the invasion of Ukraine. And so it just seems like Trump has a much better relationship with Putin to be able to guard against anything that Putin potentially does. And it almost creates a more comfortable type of situation with Russia and Ukraine if a peace deal happens, to where if Trump is in, I wouldn't anticipate Putin doing anything to Ukraine. And honestly, logically, it wouldn't make a lot of sense anyways. If there's a peace deal, a reinvasion of Ukraine would not happen for years after that anyways, which if you're Trump, you could say, we don't want it to happen at all, but at least during my administration, I know it's not going to happen. So, yeah, I think it comes down to what assurances are given to Ukraine. Really, does Ukraine have leverage to even demand these protections, whether it's from the United States? There is some questions about whether the United States has to now protect Ukraine if we do get their minerals, 50% of them. That, you know, that's something that has to be taken into consideration as well. But either way, guys, that's just the current situation. It does look like everybody wants something, right? The United States wants something, which is pretty crazy considering where we were at with the Democrats, to where it was just we were giving up everything, and it was this, oh, we're winning by proxy because we're weakening Russia. But now the United States is going to really get something for this war with all the money that they've invested. Ukraine possibly will get some type of protection, maybe from the European countries. More so, I think the best thing for Ukraine would be this relationship with the United States and Russia, which I think would create a more peaceful situation in Eastern Europe. If the United States and Russia, the United States, the figurehead of NATO, having a more cordial relationship with Russia, that would give Ukraine, to me, more of a kind of a safeguard against a potential reinvasion or anything when it comes to Russia. But either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.